Hey everyone, here's another editing tutorial. This time we have a Galaxy STI. So on the left is our before and on the right is our after. Pretty simple edit, so let's jump into Lightroom so we can see what we're working with. Okay, so here's our finished image. So let me just reset everything. So here is our raw image. As you can see, pretty flat, shot on a rooftop in Vancouver. So let's first things first, let's enable our lens correction, gets rid of any kind of distortions or vignetting that happens, and also remove our chromatic aberrations. Next, I like to get a crop. So I'm just gonna go auto straighten and see what it does. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Again, I think it's too much space at the top, so let's bring that down maybe to about here. For me personally, I like to have the grid go through the wheels, the bottom third grid go through the wheels. I just find that's a nice kind of pleasing angle. And let me see on either side. I'll just bring this in slightly. Perfect. Okay, so now we can start with our basic adjustments here. So the exposure, naturally when you shoot in RAW, everything's a bit duller. So I'm just gonna up the exposure just a little bit. Okay, so we've upped our exposure to 0.2. Highlights, we're not going to take too much down because there's not a lot of highlights in the image, so maybe just a touch down, maybe about -4, -5 is good. Shadows, again, there's some details in the car that we want to bring back, especially in kind of the grille and a bit in the wheels. So let's bump the shadows up. About there, looks good. So as you can see, we got some details back in the front of the car. Might look a little washed out now, but we're going to fix that later with a few masks. So for our whites, we're going to bump up the whites quite a bit, purely because it's a white car and I really want to emphasize that. I got it clean, so I really want to make sure it looks as white as possible. So that looks good. As far as our blacks, they look okay. I might just drop them ever so slightly to give a bit of contrast. Then texture, clarity, dehaze. I'm gonna just play around. Usually I start with 10, 10, and 10, and just to see how that looks. It doesn't look too bad at all. As you see, when you add dehaze, it adds a bit of saturation and a bit more contrast. Again, I might fix that a bit later, but I think I'm happy with texture, clarity, and dehaze. As far as our colors, our vibrance, and saturation, what I like to do is drop the vibrance. Especially, I want this kind of be like a cold industrial style image, so I don't want too many colors. So I'm going to drop the vibrance maybe to -60, but then what I'm going to do is boost the saturation to 60, so to kind of balance it out a bit. So as you can see, if I just reset both of these, it's kind of a bit of a flat image, and I think when I just drop the vibrance and add some saturation to roughly the same amount, so it's just a bit less intense colors, but it keeps the important colors, like you see the yellow and all the details in the car. And then into our tone curve, not going to do much here. Maybe I might just lift the blacks a little bit, or lift our shadows. Again, not too much so it looks washed out, maybe about here, and then bring it back across so we still keep some detail in blacks. And mid-tones, let's see, don't want to bump them too much, maybe just a little pop in the mid-tones. And sometimes the best idea is knowing when to stop. You don't have to play with everything. I want this image because it was kind of a cloudy day and the sky was blue kind of behind the clouds. I want to bring a bit more blue into the image, so I'm just going to take the highlights up here, just drag them to the left just a bit. These tone curves are really sensitive, so if you blast it even a little bit, it looks really bad. So I'm going to keep it just a touch, maybe about there. It's good. Then into our color mixer, I'm actually not going to touch the hue of anything. I'm just going to go straight to the saturation. I'm going to drop the orange. So as you can see, what the orange does, it just takes a bit of orange away from the railings here at the back. So I just want to take a bit of emphasis away from those. So maybe about 50, 56. Yellows are pretty strong here, but let's just see what happens if I boost the yellows. A bit of color comes back in the wall in the background, which I'm not too worried about. I can fix that. I want the yellows to about 40 because I really want the details, the yellow parts of the car to pop and shine through. As far as our greens, sometimes some greens can come in the yellow, so I'm just going to increase the greens saturation a little bit as well. Aqua, I always just remove the aqua completely, just in case any of it lies in the reflections of the car in the windows. Then as far as the color grading here in the shadows, kind of default I like to go to, it's 220 hue in the shadows, saturation of 10, 35, saturation 10. As far as the mid-tones, I'm just going to bring the luminance up a little bit. Then our balance, we can bring it more towards the blue or more towards the warm. As I said, I want it to be a bit more blue, so I'm just going to drop it here a little bit. And then the last thing on this page is the sharpening. So I'm going to sharpen the image. As I said before in my previous video, if you saw that, this little tip and trick, if you hold Option or Alt if you're on Windows, that shows what's being sharpened. So as you can see, everything here is being sharpened, everything in white is being sharpened. So if I drag this slider just to the right, it reduces the kind of where the sharpening is happening. So I just wanted to affect the kind of outlines of the car, maybe about there. I sharpen everything, it's sharpening all the grain and all the kind of dirt on the ground, so I want to avoid that. So I think that is a good selection. And then I'm just going to increase the sharpening just a little bit. Great, and now we move on to our mask page. So our masks, I'm going to start with a subject mask, and that did a pretty good selection, but as you can see, there's a bit of bleed over here. So I'm just going to remove that with a brush. Go subtract and select brush. I'm just going to take a bit of that away from the window, and also a bit underneath here in this window. I just want the car selected. I'm fairly happy with that, so I'm going to increase this exposure just a little bit, increase the contrast, maybe around 10 as well. The whites, I'm going to boost the whites because it's a white car, maybe not that much actually, maybe 10 as well. Good, and anything else I want to do? Maybe just add a bit of clarity to the car as well. So 10 under clarity. So this is, I'll turn off the mask so you can see before. It's one of those things you wouldn't even notice, but then when you add just that bit of pop, it really makes the car stand out. So without the mask, with the subject mask. Then I'm going to add another mask, which is going to be a radial gradient to create a vignette around the car. And I'm going to invert this mask. So let me just click up here, invert. So it just kind of covers the area around the car. So I'm just going to drop the exposure, see how that looks. It's just finding what looks natural. Sometimes you can drop it way down, but I just like when it looks natural. And I'm also looking at the histogram here, where you can see the exposure is kind of mostly in the middle, which is where I want it. Anything else, I might just do a linear gradient from the bottom here. These are just standard go-to things for car photography, where you want to draw the attention to the car itself. So you want to remove light from areas that you don't want focused. So we have our subject mask on and off, our radial gradient, turn it off, as you can see, it's quite bright. Draws more attention to the car, and then our linear gradient down the bottom, on and off. So anything else is just cleaning up. So I'm just going to clean up a few areas that are a bit distracting, maybe on the ground, and just this light here in the top I find quite distracting, so I'm just going to get rid of that as well. I'm going to go to our remove tool. You can either use the clone stamp, any of these tools. Usually just play around with what works for you. So I'm going to just select this lamp, and hopefully it takes a portion where it thinks it should be and look natural. It's not perfect, but it's good enough that you wouldn't even notice if something was there. Then a few spots down here, I might use the kind of magic remove tool, the generative AI, just to get rid of a few of these spots. Clone stamping can take a while and you have to be really specific, so let's see what happens if I just select this bit. Yeah, it's a pretty good job. Do the same with a few other bits, so I'm just going to speed up here. Okay, I think that's good enough for now. I might refine it a bit more and take away a few more dirt spots and things to make it look extra clean, but for the purpose of this video, I'm fairly happy with how that looks. If you press Y on your keyboard, you get to see a nice before and after. Here's our before image and our after image. So that's it. That is my edit of the Subaru Galaxy STI. I hope you like this pretty quick edit. Drop any comments below if you have any questions about any of the tools I used in Lightroom, and hope you enjoyed it.